Ruler School is multiplayer fantasy games where you vote with singles for Force Will and other tabletop games, as well as these amazing patrons. Extra special thanks to guest lecturer patron Ryan Lilly. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there, rulers. Welcome back after 3 very long weeks of Force of Will 2, the Teacher's Lounge, your favorite ever live Force of Will podcast featuring Ryan Miles. Wait a minute, that's not Ryan, that's Aaron Miles. Aaron Miles. Brandon Bremont.
Sponsored by A&W Cream Soda.
Oh man, I wish. And Frank Clauser over there. We're switching it up.
Hey there.
Good to have you guys here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you feel like supporting what we do here on the channel, you can go ahead and check all those links down below or consider joining as a member. You see all of our people spamming the emojis in the chat. You get access to that, deck submissions, your name in the credits, all that stuff. It all goes to support and help what we do here. With that out of the way, let's just go ahead and jump right in, because I feel like we actually have a lot to talk about, mainly because we haven't talked Force of Will in quite a bit. New set coming out this week, right? Awakening of the Ancients?
Allegedly.
Allegedly. So, before we dig in too much, overall, we've seen the Italian site have English translations of the full set of spoilers. We're not going to dig into any of that drama, but looking at the actual set itself, just kind of like your first impressions, what's your thoughts?
Underpowered.
I think it's a great set. Anything that can get me to put these weary hands down and not have to touch Gil again is a really good set in my mind. And I don't know if Cimimi is going to be a good deck or playable in any capacity, but I think the existence of that Master Rune means I don't have to play Gil anymore. And that makes me very, very happy.
Okay. Brandon?
Polarizing power. There are a lot of cards that seem downright unplayable, especially at the rare and super rare slot, and then there are a couple of cards that will just define their color for the entire time that they're going to be in standard rotation. So
okay.
We're going to see how we adapt to some of those changes.
Frank?
I'm very excited. I have a couple archetypes that I see getting very solid upgrades, and then I have a few things that I think are just basically taking decks that were sitting in the unplayable pile before and can possibly put them on the map.
Awesome. Well, my initial impression is that this set as a whole has kind of had more synergies within itself than I was kind of initially expecting, but also kind of what I was wanting. I remember I talked on the TCG Scrubs podcast about wanting white to couple with, like, having ways to couple with Adam's Master Rune a little bit better, probably potentially more 4C stuff or more like that. And if you actually look at the stuff that's come out in white, it's actually a pretty wide variety of costs, which couples interestingly with that Master Rune, as well as they actually have the most, I'm pretty sure they have the most 4C out of this set. I definitely didn't expect every single set to get some 4C, or every single color to get some 4C out of this set, but white has the most. And it goes to
4C is kind of an evergreen mechanic, though. Like, right. I don't know that they've officially declared it as such, but this sort of, like, you get a small burst of filtering your deck isn't something that really should be color specific. Like,
I agree.
Certain colors want it more than others, but every color kind of needs access to some of it because it's sort of a basic thing the game needs access to. It's like drawing cards. If you focus something that central in one color, you inherently edge out other colors. And while 4C isn't like drawing cards level of power, it's on a subtle level, like, very, very important to the game.
Yeah, I agree. And so, like, that's why I'm not necessarily, like, disappointed that white didn't get more, or I'm actually kind of excited that every color got a little bit of it. But it was nice to see that what white did get was on, like, actual kind of playable cards and was more necessary, like, foreseeing further. So, like, add to more manipulation for Adam's Master Rune and stuff. And the fact that that spell that gives white, it's like a quick cast spell that gives white for C in addition to destroying something, like, that feels pretty good because that gives some playroom there. And the other colors too, but it definitely felt like there was a lot more interset, what's the word that I'm thinking of? Interset synergy than we have necessarily seen so far within this cluster. So that was nice for me to see in terms of my initial impression of the set.
If we're talking about white, mostly because you mentioned it about 5 times, I feel like white is one card short of everything the color could have asked for right now. Like they mentioned at the start of cluster that, oh, we're moving ramp into this color, and then they gave us like 1 mana dork. That was it. And then we had set 2, and I trying to think of if we got. Oh, wait, sorry. I guess we got 2 because we also got Sculled. But like we got 1 playable one, and then we got set 2, and I don't recall a single mana card. I don't recall a single mana card in 2. And so set 3, we finally get. Oh, here's a ritual. It like in the form of Sprout. It's going to cost you some stuff to get going, but it's a massive boost in when you're doing stuff. You have this addition, which is giving you a way to like follow that up on turn 2 with ramp you can actually count on by and large. And so the only thing I feel like they missed on that aspect is we just don't have a big drop in white that you really want to play on turn 3. Because like right now you can go turn 1 mana dork, use some of that mana to play yourself a rune, turn 2 get yourself an addition down, play a second rune at the beginning of your next upkeep, and if you've used any free rune in the interim, you have 6 mana on turn 3, which is what a ramp deck wants to do. And then we got this dolphin thing.
Dolphins.
I think it's like the one card I'm really sad the set didn't pay off is there's like white has some good big drops, but none of them are really turn 3 plays. Like
For sure.
Like, you know, Mistletoe is still like very powerful, but she's very much like stabilizing you and keeping you going into the late game. And I guess Ophiel kind of does that, but we've sort of seen that she's just not enough on her own. And so I feel like that's what was missing.
One of the other things that's been interesting in this set is we have these. Every color got a card that gets better with basics, or like stones that are treated as basics, which I thought was interesting for them to kind of. It was kind of like a twist on the seal mechanic, but like for specific colors. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's actually very beneficial to reward playing basic stones. I don't know. This isn't the cycle you're referring to, but I believe the black 1-drop that dies into a stone can only get a basic darkness stone.
It can only get a card called Darkness Magic Stone.
Right. So it has to get the basic one.
Right.
I actually think that's extremely positive. Normally, it helps people get into it if they don't have a lot of the specials that they need, because you don't feel obligated to, like, when you're playing blue, you should be playing 4 times stone, even though you've only got 1 Dragon Lord's Breath in the sideboard, but just because it's strictly better than the other stone anyway. And so rewarding, that's nice. Also, there's a lot more cool arts on basic stones, so you can kind of spice that up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to find the cards for each color while you guys talk. I'll try to find the cards for each color that get better.
And the other thing to remember is that, like, going forward, like, in the hypothetical, eventually things will, like, we've swung towards, okay, let's limit your access to multiple colors right now, so both to, like, allow the design space of some of these special bit monocolored stones to take place, and also because deck building limitations can adjust the format. And so, like, right now we're in this, okay, we're focusing very much on monocolored or color with a splash decks, but eventually they will swing back to us having 2-colored decks. And when we get back there, payoffs for actually being the person who's still monocolored will be important. We haven't seen them necessarily as often in Force Will, but a good example from another game like Magic right now has like a lot of decks in Standard that are defined. I don't necessarily think the cycle they printed here is doing that, but it is something I would like to see.
Higher if you're at 4 stones. Then you have the green, who's a 1-drop 3/3, who becomes a 7/7 that can't be attacked. If you're at 4 or more wind stones, the water one is a 3/3 that becomes a 6/6 unblockable. If you control 4 water stones, the fire one is a 3/3 that becomes a 6/6 with swiftness for fire stones. And then I think personally the best one is the 1-drop that becomes a 7/7 with barrier if you're at 4 or more light stones.
You forgot a very important keyword that puts one of them far above that one, because the word machine is important right now. And that blue one has the type machine.
That's fair.
That is a 1-drop machine that turns into a 6/6 unblockable.
I actually want to touch on that because I think that with these stone resonators, Force Will's card design incompetence is on full display. They have completely laid it out and said, hey guys, I want you to look at these cards and understand that we have no idea how to make a card game. Because they have made certain special stones have the typing, and all of them are, I'd have to like look at them. I know it's like the elf stone. I don't remember what like the blue one is or the white one. I know the black one is the Rhea stone. But the 1 mana
blue one
blue
is Shayla's stone.
that gets unblockable. What was that?
Shayla's stone, the one that makes
No,
it
the
red.
coral stone. What the hell? All right. So the point is, like, if you're building a machine deck, obviously you're going to put in 4 of the machine stone because that is far and away one of the best special magic stones in standard right now. And then if you're going to pump your deck full of 6 basic wonders, that means you have a 1 mana 6/6 unblockable by about turn 6 on average. And it's the worst thing I could put. Like, why would you ever consider doing that? All of these things are completely incomparable to the special magic stones that you should just be running instead. And then, like, there are other resonators within the colors that focus on stones, like the darkness magic, the guy that, like, grabs a darkness magic stone. Absolutely bonkers. You should absolutely play basics instead of specials for that. But it doesn't synergize with the other card in the color that wants to be playing basics at all. And it actually promotes a 2-color strategy almost, because if you wanted to play a 2-color black deck, it's very easy to just jam in like 4 of one stone and then like 6 to 8 basic black stones and play the guy that grabs black stones. And they've kind of like gone in a split direction with that. I hate it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It definitely makes it interesting to me that, like, we talked a long time ago at the beginning of this cluster about like where different things could be going before we saw that white had ramp, and we had talked about the idea that like black might get ramp because black has had that way back in original Valhalla. So it's really interesting to me that now kind of both of them have it, but like Frank is saying, like they don't necessarily have all of what they would want in that color. Like that new, I know that a lot of people were talking about how Lich, like we saw his Master Rune, we saw the black super rare, we were just like, okay, so why is this like even closely remotely Lich? Or like, how are we even casting this card? It's so expensive. Like, what are we doing? And then suddenly they're like, oh yeah, here's this addition that dodges incidental removal and a one drop that just ramps you quickly for black. It is really interesting to see that kind of stuff pop up.
Well, if we're talking about Lich, it's because, once again, they printed all of their Lich support in not black. The best Lich card in this set is a 1-drop white edition that has death triggers and pays you off for having a ton of little tokens. And it's over there in the wrong color.
It is only a 1-drop, though, right? So you can just play black-white Lich.
Yeah, I hate
Just
it.
saying,
I remember back at the start of the cluster when they talked about Master Runes, and they were like, yeah, you know, we'll be releasing Master Runes throughout the cluster. And they had this, they tried to tell us this idea that they would be
balancing them?
Assessing the format and then giving weaker rulers better Master Runes. And, like, you know, kind of staving off the good rulers' Master Runes. And if you have any knowledge of behind-the-scene card games, you know that that's impossible because sets are usually done like 6 months in advance. Or at least 3 months in advance, so you don't have time to assess the format and then base your set on the results. And like we all knew that from the get-go, and then to see Lich's Master Rune, we just kind of see on full display that, you know, it was all just a ruse.
A ruse. So let's we're starting to dig into like in terms of meta, or like discussion about like which decks or which rulers we're starting to think might have some success. So with the cards that are coming out, Aaron, you already kind of mentioned the fact that hopefully you don't have to play Gil anymore.
Hopefully.
Do you have some impressions about looking at this set? What rulers you think are going to, like, how the meta is going to shift? Maybe what new rulers you think are going to maybe step into the limelight or have a shot? What rulers are going to drop? And even you can tell me what cards you think might make that happen, and I can try to pull those up on the screen too.
So, from an initial standpoint, when I first saw the set, I figured, you know, obviously Chimimi's Master Rune is probably a very good card. Chimimi already had, like, one of the better Gil matchups in the format because you were essentially a Hanzo deck, which is, like, kind of a rough matchup for Gil. Like, it's very easy for them to punish you, and then Chimimi just having, you know, Elephant Rush instead of Sealing Scroll just made the matchup a lot easier for them. Them getting access to this Master Rune that can now force Gil to block, I thought Chimimi and Hanzo were going to effectively be the same deck, but Hanzo would have a better Lucifer matchup, and Chimimi would have a better Gil and Hanzo matchup. So I expect like some kind of green Zoo deck to be good. Obviously, I think Lucifer, no matter how you want to build the deck, the addition of the addition and the Rampstone guy is just going to be really good. So like Lucifer, Hanzo, I think Brunhild still sucks, but I've been playing Gil all format, so she might do better against normal decks, whereas like Gil just trounced that deck. So I actually have to test Brunhild more because I have a very skewed opinion of that deck right now. And then I think Kirik is going to be absolutely phenomenal for the first event because I think everybody is going to recognize the power of the altar, put addition removal in their main deck, and then Kirik is just going to come in and say, wow, you're playing dead cards and a dead rune deck? What do you do? I'm Kirik. And just going to come in and like get way too many top 8 spots because it's America. And then hopefully Gil is just in the gutter and just can't beat anything, and I don't have to touch that deck again.
That's fair. That's fair. Brandon, what about you?
Well, and we'll want to point out the problem there, and just kind of brought up, which is that.
Oh, and Machines is really good.
Okay, if Kirik is good, then Gil is still good because Kirik didn't really get anything new to beat Gil, and Gil was beating Kirik before. So if that's going to be popular, then we have a Gil matchup. I think Machines is next to untouchable, though. I mean, I don't know if Aaron was just saying Machines is an afterthought, but I think that 1-mana machine is insane. I think
Freya? You talking about Freya?
Yeah, sure. But even that Scorpion machine 1-drop. So like Machines is just so in love with 1-drops, it's not even funny. And like I was playing the vanilla 4/4 in my Machines for a time. I'm not saying that was strictly correct, but it was a testament to just how good 1-drops are in the Machines deck. I also really like the Loki's Master Rune that she got, the one that looks at the top couple cards of your deck for the number of stones you have in.
7 or 10. It's
7. It stops 7,
right,
and then you get a cost X or less, where X is the number of stones you control.
Sure. So previously there was basically no difference between Loki and Arthur. You didn't play either of their Master Runes. Now we could play Loki with that and a Mystery Box and just have so much refill against control, so much cheating, huge ass things. Like it's a better mid-range deck than anything, especially if Chamimi's going to be good. Like the Machines deck is just going to run over every other mid-range deck in the format.
So do you think that there's credibility? Like, so you're talking about Loki's Master Rune, and you also talked about the 1-drop Freya, the one that like gets to peak. The easiest way to make sure that deck gets to peak is she doesn't say Machine Resonator, she just says Machine. So if you start with Arthur, she automatically comes in as a 0/6. Do you think that it's still? Do you think that it's still just strictly better to just play Loki?
Yeah, I don't think Control a Machine is a hindrance in that deck. Like,
yeah, I think the only thing that's going to kill a 0/2 that isn't going to kill a 0/6 is like McKay.
Or Sandstorm. I could honestly see Sandstorm kind of becoming a staple in most rune decks.
Actually, I think that we've had a big influx of really good Divinity 1 runes, and I think Sandstorm is going to start to fall off because of it.
Yeah.
So
sure, but
like one of the deck for one, like I know this one isn't on Aaron's radar, but one of the decks that most wanted to play Sandstorm in all honesty was Runehild decks because it was a 0-mana Divinity 1 rune.
Sure.
And even if it only costs 1 mana, they just got an absolutely crazy Divinity 1 rune. Like, exactly the Divinity 1 rune the deck wanted. So, like, if one of the decks that was, like, most appetite for just, like, a random Divinity 1 rune just got, like, something better, I don't like Sandstorm's chances unless... Especially in week 1 where things are going to be, like, wild and crazy.
Sure, absolutely. My thought with Sandstorm is definitely not for this weekend that it's probably going to be something pretty consistent. But my thought is that it's really going to come down to the topic we're going to talk about a little bit, and this high risk, high reward kind of early game combo stuff, is that white, blue, and black all have this new 0/2 playable card that really only does stuff if it survives a turn, but if it survives a turn, can be pretty devastating. So my thought is, like, so the idea being that for black with the new addition, right? So, like, you can Sandstorm to kill their guys, sure, they'll get a stone, but they can't, like, do the crazy addition loop on turn 2 and go suddenly to 5 stones if you Sandstorm that. If you do it against Sprout, Brunhild can't drop the super aggressive flip turn 2. If you do it against the Machine player, they just played a 1-drop that literally did nothing and they don't get to scry for it. You don't do any of the scrying with that. So in the newness of this fresh format, I definitely can agree with you that Sandstorm probably just doesn't need to be there because there are just better Divinity 1s. But my thought is that based on how playable those 0/2 1-drops become, Sandstorm probably is going to be something that's pretty important, potentially.
One thing I would note, Jeremy, among your 0/2 1-drops, You actually actively want your opponent to sandstorm the black one, right? It's a
No,
death
so
trigger.
so I get wanting to have your opponent to sandstorm the black one so that you get a free stone. The thing is, if you let your opponent keep it on their turn, they just play the addition and then sack her to the addition. So then they can like get even more value out of her, as opposed to just sandstorming her early and leaving them with just 2 stones and they can't combo with her. Is the concept?
I would absolutely rather my opponent be down a card, even if it's a rune, than have a single counter on my addition. To be honest, like
Okay,
I
that's
think
fair.
the
I
difference-
mean,
I think the difference there is like if you're not sandstorming my black guy turn 1, you're never sandstorming. So like that's probably a good trade for you if sandstorms in your rune deck.
right. Like, I'm not sure, like, ultimately in looking at it, I'm not sure, like, the one that I'm, like, the most, like, iffy about is doing it against the black one, which is, like, again, because you're essentially trading a card for a card and giving your opponent a stone, so it's like, eh. But it is just something that's crossed my mind in looking at the initial set. We'll have to see how testing goes, for sure.
if the red guy, if the shoe also had 200 toughness, I'd be way more on board with sandstorm. Because then it starts to like dip in multiple, like in pretty much every color.
Joey-
But shoe surviving sandstorm is a big blow against the card.
Joey Schilling in the chat here from Rogues Guild saying if we don't sandstorm them turn 1, they're just gonna Power of Immortality here. Well, I don't know how they're doing that if they only have 2, because they can't like Power of Immortality plus play the addition on turn 1
So
or turn 2. But
I kind of want to open this can of worms because I seem to be outnumbered here, and I'm very prepared to be wrong. But I kind of thought that addition was terrible, but you guys keep talking about it.
so the thing that makes that addition so good right now is the fact that both it's sacrificing to get a counter and sacrificing to get a unit are both instant speed for 0
Right,
cost.
So you're paying 2 mana for an addition, and you have to put like how many cards into it to get your mana back for it? Like even if that just becomes a 2-drop at quick cast speed, you have to banish 2 other cards that you played.
Well,
that
don't
were at
forget,
least 1 mana.
Black has a 1-drop that gets them 2 counters on it.
The Skeleton Horde.
Skeleton Horde.
Yeah. Okay. So like that's your best case scenario. You paid 3 mana for a quick cast 2 cost resonator that took 2 cards out of your hand.
So
Like, I
so
mean,
the idea being the initial combo that so the initial combo that people have been describing, Brandon, has been this. So you play her on turn 1, turn 2 you play the addition, sack her to the addition, get a freak stone that comes into play recovered, get a counter. Skeleton Horde, sack it twice, get 2 counters. Now you have 3 counters on it, and then on your opponent's turn, whenever your opponent tries to do something, they can sack it and get the 3-drop that brings the Spirit Lady back from the grave. So then suddenly going into their turn 4, they're sitting on potential 4-5 stones.
Okay, so you're describing a combo that takes 3 cards and 4 mana to get you a 3-drop.
It's a best case scenario.
And it is a best case scenario, and like ultimately that's one of the things that I want to talk about is how viable are these big risk, big reward, and does it lend itself to the power that everyone's considering it to have?
Okay, so
So
that was
you're
also-
you're opening the exact can of worms that I wanted to discuss, Brandon. So thank you.
All right, well, you're welcome, Jeremy. So like your best case scenario still sounds genuinely awful. Like I literally cannot even come up with a line with that addition that sounds even remotely good. But we keep talking about it, so I'm like prepared to be wrong. Can someone give me a good use for that card?
If I wasn't going to a GP this weekend, I could.
I'll take
Best
that.
I can
I'll
say
take that. That's
is
fine.
I've done about 2 to 3 days of testing, probably about 15 hours of testing, and it's definitely top 5 cards in the set. Probably top 5 cards in standard.
The addition or the 1-drop?
Edition.
The addition.
Edition.
I'll take your word for it.
But I think other people are gonna like realize that and then overcompensate for it, and then like we get this weird game of chicken with our deck lists going into the tournament of like, oh, I'm playing too much addition removal and nobody's actually playing the addition because it turns out it's really bad. And Aaron Miles had no idea what he was talking about on day 1, which is very possible. I've done it before. I've thought I had a tier 0 deck in my hands, and then Ryan Miles is like, actually, this is the tier 0 deck, and I'm very glad he's my brother and he can show me that before the tournament, so I don't walk in there like an idiot.
Yeah, and so that's what and that's one of the reasons why I think I wanted to talk about this idea of this kind of high risk, high reward early game combo. Is a lot of the things there was someone who posted a combo with this addition that works to like you don't sack it immediately. They do like something else with it to try to stick like an Athenia on turn 3. I'm not exactly sure how they were doing it because I didn't read the picture very well. But like for the black, it's like it uses her in the addition to kind of combo quick it into an Athenia turn 3. That kind of thing. And then white's kind of all-in super combo was this idea of you go turn 1 Sprout, it survives. Turn 2 you ditch, you have 1 stone and Sprout. You ditch the 6-drop Ushua that gives all your Fire Resonators swiftness and looks at the top 5 and puts in a Fire Resonator into play. And then you go use Sprout, flip Brunhild, grab Ushua. Ushua looks at the top 5. Happy Dreamland, you get the Allosaurus that gives your J-Ruler swiftness, and suddenly you swing in for 37. But it's this idea of just like, even that like early game like hyper Brunhild flip with Sprout, like ultimately if that gets disrupted, like if your opponent has a Lorite, you're just like get cucked, right? Like in a pretty big way.
You have Lorite, Evil Elemental Uprising,
yeah, like there's a lot of ways that goes terribly. So the question of why I think it's important to talk about that this week is we're going into a super wide, or not necessarily super wide, but super Wild West format of people having a bunch of different cards, some people not having access to the new set versus some people having access to the new set, that kind of stuff. So walking into this event and knowing that those all-in combos have already kind of been discussed in the public eye, how viable is it to take that risk walking into this event, in your opinion?
As someone who has topped multiple Grand Prix, I think it's a terrible fucking idea.
That's fair.
I think Sprout might actually be one of the most unplayable cards in the set. I think it's very counterintuitive to what White wants to be doing. Like, unless you go all in on a turn 2 Brunhild flip, I think Sprout is completely garbage. And I thought that, and then I realized that Sprout has to tap, and it just cemented it in my mind that Sprout's just a terrible card in the current New Frontiers format. It's very counterintuitive to anything Brunhild wants to do. The black stuff, there's a lot of like, there's probably a million cheeky turn 1 through 4 combos people have come up with between the Addition and the Stone Ramp guy, and probably 20% of them are actually work the way they intend them to, and they didn't just misread anything. And then of those 20%, I'd say maybe like 5% of them are GP viable. I don't think combo exists in this format, especially knowing that like Gil still exists and can be brought to this event by other people who aren't me. And if these sinful hands can't find a better deck, you know I'm coming in with Gil again.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, not just Gil, we just got a great new, like, Master Rune puts Shamimi on the plate as well.
Which
and if she's on the plate, you
green,
suddenly have
right?
a 3rd green deck in play. That is a rough format to play any sort of combo, because Shamimi, like, I mean, she eats up a lot more of her deck space than the other two with, like, doing certain things, but she still has enough room to just mess with your combo.
Even if we're both just playing like Lucifer decks, and you're playing some, new combo deck that you found, and I'm just playing the standard Joan d'Arc deck, and I go turn 1 Look of Corruption, and your deck falls apart, like, we're not having a good time here, buddy.
That's very true.
One thing I will say, Aaron, as far as like white decks is, so like the all-in that's being discussed, like I hadn't heard that we had gotten greedy enough that our like thing we're putting in the graveyard was Ushua. So I didn't realize that someone had gone even further beyond Max Greed. But I will point out there is actually like a line of play that involves just a bunch of cards the white deck does actually want to play that makes sense for that, like for what that type of play is trying to do, because we got spoiled late in the Ares card, and he's a big body who provides immediate ability to play more tempo. He makes all of your other stuff bigger, including making all of your Orphikas not die to random. You have to at least put 2 cards in to kill all the Orphikas, which is a big deal for that deck. And if you ever get
trying to pull up Ares here to show people real quick.
Big to be flipped, or too big to be shot down by most current field wipes. And the cost is you play a 1-drop mana
Here's Ares for everybody.
You're playing a less stable one than what they were playing before, but you did have those slots already in there. And then you are discarding a card. But if what you're discarding is like a random 2-drop human, all of a sudden you're just also flipping a rune, which you want to do for any of these early plays.
Random 2-drop human. It's Messenger, Frank. We all know it's Messenger of the Sun.
You're correct. It's Messenger of the Sun.
You're not wrong.
What other 2-drop human are you playing? It's Joan d'Arc.
Yeah. But so the idea being that like that line of play of like using that turn 2, you're still getting your stone. You're putting this this is the ideal, but you're putting an Ares into play and then putting in a couple random 2-drops. That's actually a line of play in line with what White was already doing, with the way the decks were already built and consistently working. That isn't.
I'm excited to
as
play
all-in,
Ares.
because if they have Graveyard Hate, you still get Ares plus a 2-drop out of your hand. If they have the Trigger Hate, you're still going to get the Ares plus the card out of your graveyard. And they basically spent their automatic hate on please don't have 2 mana. These are all lines of play that aren't immune to the hate cards you bring against that strategy, but they're not just dumpstered by it.
So with Ares, so here's a quick question, and talking about Ares, of the white, of the 2 white super rares, I really like Ares. I think that Ares has a lot of potential. But if we're talking about this Sprout stuff, don't Sprout and Ares actually kind of work nicely together in the fact of like again. Aaron, recognize that I am also agreeing with you that I think that Sprout is not a problem. But like you could potentially do turn 1 Sprout, turn 2 Call Stone, pay 1 and Sprout, play Ares, play Messenger, and leave open 1 on turn 2 using Sprout, and like that seems like a pretty solid opener for a Brunhild list.
So I think my problem with Brunhild as a whole, and I kind of came to this conclusion as I was listening to Frank talk, because it piggybacks off of a point that Bremont made. I don't know where he is, but for me, Bremont's up there. The machine deck. So I do think the machine deck is very, very good, and Brunhild and Mono White in general seems to be the deck and color with the absolute least amount of disruption, but does not have the hardest pop-off. And even something like the machine deck, like Brandon talked about the super rare, I honestly like the 1-drop super rare, the 0/2, that honestly didn't really make it on my radar for machines, but Mini Leviathan did. And just 3 mana, enter, bounce a creature, completely destroys a ramp strategy if it's a one-time ramp like Sprout is. And I think like if you turn 2 Ares, and my turn 2 is energize Mini Leviathan, put the Ares back in your hand, you're suddenly down 2 cards for nothing.
Potentially, yeah, I can definitely see that. My argument there is that White, in terms of the protection, is with that Sprout play, is the idea of you're leaving 1 up, 1 will going into your opponent's turn, sitting on Messenger plus Ares, which means that you can either do Whispers of the Angel for double draw, or you can do Protection of the Seraphs, Protection of the Angels to protect the Ares for 1. Like, that for me feels like the only real viable way to use Sprout, and I will also say that really only works turn 1. Like I agree with you that in the later game, like why would you even bother doing that?
So if you're protectioning and evangelizing the Ares, then I think your opening hand was Sprout, Ares, Protection, Acolyte.
Which is like the God hand, right?
Yeah,
which is like the God hand.
To have Ares and Protection, you need to have a God hand, and that's my problem, is like you have 1 mana open, and it is the least threatening color mana that you could possibly be holding open.
For sure, absolutely. I do have a super chat here real quick from Todd Dreisbach. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct, buddy. Who is the host? We're working with Portal Comics and Games for the event that we're talking about for this weekend. The Pennsylvania 4.5K WGPQ at Portal Comics and Games, May 25th and 26th. It says they're drafting on Friday night. That'll be fun, drafting the new set leading into the GP. So, Brandon, you're not going.
Tragically, no.
Aaron, you are going. Frank, you are going.
Yes.
Right? So, looking forward to seeing you guys kind of come back. A major turnoff, Joey says, a major turnoff for me was Sapling, that it was removed itself and didn't go to grave. Be playing it if it could draw off Altar when it produced Will. What? Oh, sure, I get it. Like, drawing off of Life-Stealing Altar with Sprout.
And my problem with Life-Stealing Altar is that I think it's a casualty of the Black Altar, where I think we're going to start seeing Dispel and the Unsealing of God and a lot of addition removal make its way into both main and rune decks, and just accidentally turn off Brunhild when they're actually targeting other decks. Because I think the Barrier Castle that came out in green is a very powerful card, but I don't know if it's going to make it in the main decks if people are overcompensating for the Black Altar at this first event, at least.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, let me try to think through some of the other cards. I'm looking through some of these other cards here that I'm seeing in blue. You talked about the mini Leviathan. The mini Leviathan is a 3-drop, right?
Yeah.
That I'm trying to find it here. It'll be in Italian, which is super great for me.
Do you want me to just
read
read
it
it?
off, Jeremy?
Yeah, go ahead. Just read it off of.
So Mini Leviathan is blue and 2 for a 700/700 machine. With enter, return target resonator to its owner's hand, and
Full stop.
banish
Card
2
over.
mini.
Card done. That's it.
It has flavor text, which is banish 2 Mini Leviathan. Search your deck for a card with Leviathan in its name and put it into the field. Then shuffle your deck. Although I would point out, there are times where, like, you say it's flavor text, but if you're playing a playset, that is still, you can banish 2 Mini Leviathan to go get a 3rd Mini Leviathan.
I suppose.
It's Leviathan in its name.
So here's an interesting thing about this
People
card.
are going to kill stuff.
So here's an interesting thing about this card for me. And this is a draw comparison to a really old card from Raya Cluster, which was the 3-drop Mermaid that had, I think, the same stat lines and said
Yeah,
if
just
it was
different type.
if it was raining, you did the same thing.
Aqua Mermaid. I love that card.
So Aqua Rifle Mermaid, right? Is this card's just strictly better than that because it's not weather dependent.
It's the type. It's totally
But it's also because it's a machine.
yeah, that race is extremely powerful. Like,
It also
just being
looks
a
cool.
machine. Like,
It does look a lot cooler, not gonna lie.
the start deck card for Aqua Rifle Mermaid's pretty dope. But yeah.
So moving outside, is there anything else necessarily that we want to talk about in terms of this can of worms of like super early game, like trying to go super combo-y with it, or like what you should be thinking about in terms of what to build for this weekend?
I want to step back from this conversation a
Sure.
little bit and address the real issue with combo. And part of the way that you can judge the power of a combo is how good your fallback strategy is. Like,
Sure.
when this combo does not go off, do you still have a deck that you're playing? It's like you look at the Keurig deck that plays like martial arts tournament and bracelet and stuff. Well, if you draw bracelet, it feels bad. If you don't have, Pia exactly, then the tournament doesn't feel good. But your fallback is that you're still just a pretty darn good Keurig deck. And when the combo goes off and you do get a Pia with a bracelet, and then you just feel ridiculous. IU is another good example where if you get the cards to like combo, AA is a little different in that she'll always have the cards because of her gods art. But she still just plays kind of this big J ruler strategy even when she doesn't pop off with her combo, and then also just kind of falls back on the combo sometimes. And so that's what's really good. When you're talking about this deck that like sprouts and puts the 6-drop in the yard and flips Brunhild and then flips the 3-drop that gives the ruler swiftness, like now you're talking about a deck that has red cards that it'll never cast if the combo doesn't go off.
I
And so
think
that's
I have
part of
the
reason
answer. No matter what color you're playing, if Ushua is in your deck, you've gone too fucking deep. That's the point where you have to stop and be like, all right, we're too all in on this combo. We can't do this anymore. I don't care if you're playing a black-red deck that just happens to play Ushua and like the thing that cheats in Umar that I can Heroic Epic. You've gone too far. Take Ushua out of the deck, put in real cards, which, there are consequences to your actions, and drawing Ushua is one of them, and you can't afford that. I will clap the shit out of you if you draw an Ushua for turn.
Well said. Well
You
said.
can also talk about the consistency of your combo. So like casting mystery box is a 1-card combo, but it starts in your rune deck, so your machine's deck just gets away with it.
Yeah, I think the machine deck has the best combo where essentially all you have to do is like play 3 1-drops, play the god on turn 3, and then turn 4 you can mystery box, and that's a good combo. And your fallback is I'm a machine deck. And there's no way to stop the combo either. I can make it unchaseable.
The combo is playing Lancelot while you control machine resonators.
So I have an interesting question, and I proposed this to Brandon specifically because the feature match that you guys are going to see on Tuesday or Wednesday is me playing the deck that Brandon shipped me, which is this Isis burn control that you had talked about. Now, that in playing that deck, there was one card that always felt a little bit weird, which was the Fires of the Demon King, the 0.
That card is so good.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I really liked it.
Dork?
It's the 0/6 that like when it or 0, I think it's a 0/2 or something. When it dies, you burn something for 600 damage. But my question becomes, with the new edition of the Isis Master Rune, the 2 red,
Yeah.
is that deck still even remotely, like, does that deck still become something that you think could be fringe playable, or is the fact that we still have green and a card called Last Days of a Powerless Dragonoid still exists, still just keep that deck out of the format?
I think that Keurig keeps that deck out of the format more than anything else, but
Interesting. Can you explain why?
it's Keurig in your control deck, and you have no outs to stop Keurig.
Yeah, I feel like when I said that white had the least amount of interaction, I actually meant red, and I consistently forget that red exists outside of Keurig. But if you have one red mana open, oh, I'm going harder than if you had one white mana open.
So the deck, I will say that the Isis control deck is better than people give it credit for, but it can't beat Keurig, so it's not actually playable.
So my question is: it just because of the fact that, like,
100%. What? Sorry.
is it just because that they have? Is it because that Ground and Air is a 1-cost card, and you'd be spending a 2-cost card to answer a 1-cost card?
Yeah, so Keurig will do damage is kind of the long and short of it.
Sure.
And so you need to be able to kill Keurig back at some point. Like, even if you stabilize against Keurig, they'll still just find high speeds. They'll still find nonsense.
Sure.
And their J-Ruler also you need interaction with, and the red deck doesn't have a whole lot of J-Ruler interaction.
That's true.
And so, yeah, it makes it very difficult.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I
look
feel
forward to the feature match this Wednesday because you're going to see that control deck in action. Unlike the way it was played in at the event in Charlotte.
I'm not gonna insult anyone on this stream. I appreciate the person that took
played very differently, so I think people will enjoy seeing that match.
very creatively.
Is that Justin Klinger? That guy was in my hotel room. I told him not to do it. I told him he could just win an Isis, and he was like, "No, I want to play."
No,
Isis.
he had like the okay. I don't want to go on the.
Nope, we're not going to go into it. Not
I
going to
don't
go
even
into
know if
it.
it was him. I just know
He could have
brought it.
won. He could have won. Anyway, continue.
So we have a little bit of time left. We'll have about 15 minutes. So I'll let people in the chat kind of ask us any questions they have about our thoughts about the new set or anything else that they want to bring up and have us discuss. But in looking at the set, are there any cards that we haven't already talked about that you guys think are worth mentioning? And this can be in any color, and I'll try to bring it up on screen.
Yes.
Aaron?
I can actually. I have the set pulled up right here. I'm trying to find it. It is Soldati della Nueva. I don't know what it is. It's the rune that's draw X, where X is the number of resonators that attack this turn.
Ah,
in
the
blue.
machine one. Yes.
Yeah. So that was the only.
the soldiers
card...
of the new round table.
Yeah. So that is the only card that I hadn't seen before they put up the Italian database, because like through the French TCG page they had spoiled a lot of the set, and then this was the only card that I hadn't previously seen that really impressed me, because it makes it so that when you awaken your mystery box and you get like 4 or 5 guys, you have a follow-up turn that's just draw 4 or 5 cards. And the ability to refuel like that in a deck that also gets the main deck mystery box once you're already at mystery box mana, I think that's a huge improvement for the machine deck, and it gives it a very powerful late game. On top of like you're probably going to draw at least 1 or 2 Loki Master Rune, cheat like a Mosasaurus or a Misty Dragon into play, and then still have mana to dump all your machines out of your hand.
Especially considering based on the matchup, you're probably going to be awakening the mystery box to dump your hand, and you've already been like purging your hand pretty quick because there's so many 1-drops in the deck.
So do you want to say
for machines, empty awakening mystery box is rarely more than 1 card.
Right.
The rune deck for this machine stack is getting a little crowded. You were talking about Mosasaurus and stuff. I think we're probably dropping the awakening nonsense in this deck and just going full aggro machines, because it's better anyway.
Which is really funny because we're playing Loki, who is the awakening ruler.
Well, that was something that Ryan had pointed out to me. We haven't gotten any awakening cards for Loki since set 1.
Correct.
I think they just like forgot that that's Loki's whole thing. And they were just like, awakening, we threw the keyword in, forgot about it, and then just made it big guys deck.
Hey, fairy tales. There's like a sub fairy tales theme.
Fairy tales have a 6-drop that doesn't even have the decency to say draw 2 cards. It's draw 2, discard 2. Why am I playing a 6-drop that doesn't even draw 2 cards? And then Fenrir. Ooh, Fenrir's my favorite card in this set. It's probably absolutely unplayable, but Fenrir Form 2, that's everything I want out of a bomb. A 6-mana, quick cast, top deck your guy, draw 2 cards, and it's a dog. Oh, that's that good shit. That's what I want out of blue, but I can't cast it because it's 6 mana.
I know.
Oh, goodness gracious. Frank, do you have any cards in this set that you think we should talk about?
I'm actually surprised this didn't come up in our discussion of all-in decks, because you wouldn't stop talking about this all-in deck when it was just one random guy with frogs. And then they gave you another 3-drop that just vomits 2 things onto the field if you're playing a cheap rune deck. And you're like, oh, no, I'm done with frogs now.
Which one is this one? Remind me which one this is.
So this is 3 Beast Warrior Tiger Me.
Yes.
Green for an 800 that says...
I'm going to pull it up on screen for people to see, but...
enter, draw a card if you're playing Chimimi. And then Rune 5, enter. Search your deck for the 3 Beast Warrior Eagle Me, which is a reasonable card, and 3 Beast Warrior Mola Me, which you're going to put like 1 or 2 of in the deck to find with this card. Put them into play, shuffle your deck.
So I actually think this card is really good. It's like it's not just being talked about. It's Hoonglong, kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of Hoonglong.
This is not Huanglong. This is nowhere near Huanglong. How dare you disrespect his name in this house? Huanglong is a GP champion.
So it costs half the cost of Hoonglong. It draws a card just like Hoonglong did. No, it's certainly not a 10th as good. It puts 3 like real bodies on the board for pretty darn cheap, and it replaces itself.
Yeah, and
it's like a 4 for 1, just like Hoonglong.
I'm opening up for Aaron to call me an idiot here, but I actually, if I was playing a Chimimi deck, I kind of think I'd want to play Eagle Me anyway. It's the 1-drop 300 that you sack to pump something by 4.
Absolutely not. I'm convinced that I fever dreamed this card because nobody knows what I'm talking about. But Erwin, the buy 2 box promo that apparently nobody else has heard of, is broken
the 1-drop
shit.
The 1-drop 3/3. If you control 2 other wind resonators, you can tap to pump something up.
It absolutely exists. No one can have it this weekend.
Why not?
So I'm a pretty affluent Force of Will player. Like, relative to a regular player base, I get a lot more cards.
They don't know what
I'm going to have 1 unless the shop there is like, oh, surprise, you can just buy 3 of these.
I think I'm going to have 6. But that's because, like, I have a friend group that doesn't know how to build decks, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, you guys should play this cool Lucifer deck. And then I take the Chimimi deck, and I just play 4 Erwin. And then, you know, I get interviewed for winning the Grand Prix, and I'm like, you know, if you guys just supported the game and bought product, then you too could have this great winning deck that requires 4 buy 2 box promos. Here's my $1,000 Force Will deck. But I think that Erwin makes it so that the 1-drop is actually unplayable. But I will say that I think Tiger Me is playable because I think I just like a 3-mana 8/8 draw card. Like, I think that might actually be good enough to just be played in a zoo deck.
I guess part of this depends on your opinion of the Hippo, the 6/5 1-drop. Are you still playing him, or is he dead to you?
I never liked that guy. Pygmy Hippo?
Yeah.
No, Pygmy Hippo was great. Don't fucking listen to him.
The other question is, if you're running Tiger Me, are you not running Elephant Rush? Because otherwise, this guy's not turning on until at least turn 6.
No, you're playing her new Master Rune.
Look, Algernon, I think, is one of the most underrated green cards in this set, and I'm mainly my Master Runes, and I'm searching them with Algernon.
I don't even fucking know what Algernon does.
I'm gonna bring him up right now. Algernon.
But Aaron, I do think you disliking Pygmy Hippo changes the texture a lot, because every one of these cards in the list of Tiger Me stuff is Mimi Warrior / Beast.
Is there any Beast energy left?
Is there what?
Just the Pygmy Hippo.
That's what I thought. I didn't think there was any, like, you know, I mean, we had mono green Beast top of Grand Prix before, but it was years ago.
Yeah.
And I was pretty sure that all of the Beast synergy had actually rotated out or was found in red mixed among the Dragonoid and Dragon synergy.
They put like a couple Beast cards in the original Chimimi stuff. Like, the Pygmy Hippo is only a 1-drop if you're playing enough Beasts.
I think you are, now that we're playing the Tiger Me package. Those girls are all beasts, so like it turns Pygmy Hippo on.
But I also do agree with you, Aaron, that I'm kind of on board for just like an 8/8 that draws cards. Like, that's part of what has me excited, is the floor of the card is pretty reasonable to me, and then its requirements are I play a 1-drop I'm fine with, and like 1 copy of a 2-drop that's bad, but not the absolute bits.
Yeah, I'm like actually kind of torn on where to put Chimimi in the format, because I'm pretty sure, like, obviously Chimimi got the new stuff, but it's very reasonable to play her Master Rune in a different deck because it's reasonably costed. So like people are going to come in with, like, theoretically you should come in with Hanzo, because Hanzo, like, if you're expecting a lot of Lucifer and Brunhild, Hanzo is unquestionably the better deck. Chimimi doesn't actually give you a whole lot in those matchups. But then if you just ignore the meta and you're like, I want to play Chimimi, and you play Chimimi, you should beat the Hanzo decks.
Well, the other thing I'll point out as far as like cards that care about her Master Rune is, I mean, I know it's one you're not super excited about, but Brunhild wants to play that card too.
Yep.
Yeah, someone had pointed out to me like I'm always on the lookout for runes that I can play in Brunhild because of the rune
Omniscience.
stone.
Missions, yeah.
And Shamimi's Master Rune. Some people have even talked to me about potentially cutting all Brunhild Master Runes from the rune deck and playing Shamimi's Master Rune in your rune deck as Brunhild, and just constantly having access to it for 4 mana. I think that might be a little bit much, but if
I
you're
think
on
that
like
is
a go
a lot.
wide strategy, what else are you going to do on turn 4? Assuming you manage to ramp out your Ares. You might just kill someone like that. Not me, but someone. That's like top decking Ushua.
So, so one of the interesting things, just in talking about this set as a whole, and I believe this has been the case for the entirety of Force of Will's history, is that set 3, in some way or shape or form, for every cluster, has either broken everything to shit and made it a one-deck format, or just been god-awful. Or in the sense of, like, no, Millennium Ages was set 4, so it really has just been, the third set has this tendency to just be like, no, one deck format. Are we seeing the first set 3 to not create a one deck format?
So I want to mention that in Alice Cluster, I'm pretty sure the only relevant card in all of set 3 was Apollo. But that was enough.
Yeah, that
I
was
want to argue
enough.
that we were in a one deck format before that.
I was like,
If you don't count
I'm confused how Alice Cluster at all gets on that list because Alice Cluster got broke by the printing of Reflect Refrain in
Whoa.
set 2.
Take me back to SKL format. Yo, the Golden Days format? Welcome to the Platinum Days, the Diamond Days, the SKL format. That was
Oh,
good.
goodness.
So the argument that like set 3 always break things is like all of a sudden like, well, Grim Cluster doesn't really count because you're adding 50% more cards, and it was also not as drastic a shift, not too drastic a shift. Alice Cluster was broken by set 2. Then we have 2 blocks in a row where it kind of where it happened, and then now we have a set where it's definitely not happening. So all of a sudden you're like 2 for 5, and that's not even a trend.
Definitely
That's a
not
minority.
Okay, but
I think
also a vast majority of the Force Will formats are one deck formats. Like we don't recognize that this game fundamentally is not very well balanced.
Yeah, we just got out of a one deck format and nobody seemed to realize that there were 2 decks. There were Gil and people who had no earthly interest in winning a Grand Prix.
Oh yeah, and then before that we had Time Spinning Witch and people that had no interest. Before that, what was even before Time Spinning Witch? Fox at one point.
I mean, I think we can admit that there's always a best deck in format.
That's kind of my concern looking at this set is like I can see 3 or 4 decks that I think are like very good, but I'm pretty sure given a month or 2, one of them is going to topple the other ones. Someone's going to figure something out. It's not going to be an Ushua deck. Please don't try it. I'll save you a lot of time. But I think one of these decks might turn out to just be significantly better than the rest of it, and I definitely wouldn't bet against Fremont on saying it's machines.
So I guess what I guess I should clarify is when I say like one deck format, I mean talking about like when we had top 8s that were 7 of the same deck and then one other random. Like that's
God,
what I mean.
In
Like,
America, we can't even get 7 people to enter a tournament with Gil. It's not Gil's fault. It's America's fault. We've let you down, Force of Will and Brokenness. I have a boner for Keurig. That's never been the best deck in the format, but we keep bringing it to things. Why do we do that? We're embarrassing ourselves. And this is how JPK won another Grand Prix, because you guys brought Keurig. Shout out to Andrew McIntyre, the Keurig god. I will never fault him for bringing Keurig. Good job being the only Keurig to top that and topping like 12 Grand Prix with Keurig. Keep it up. Yeah, I think it's just an unwillingness. Like, it's no shock that the Force Will player base has reduced itself in the last couple of years, and we've lost a lot of the top players doing that, like in that loss of players.
Sure.
And I think that there are just people who aren't interested in winning these things anymore, or aren't interested in like talking to the pro players and figuring out what the actual best deck is, regardless of what it seems like the best deck is. Like, if you look last format, it seemed like we were in an open format, but if you talk to any top player, they're going to tell you Gil is the only deck. It won like 9 of the 11 international Grand Prix that we had. And people just don't care. They want to run what they want to run. And because nobody's running enough of the best deck, or like player skill just isn't there for the people that are paying attention to it, we have this myth of a diverse format.
Sure. I can definitely see that. Absolutely.
I miss you, Kentober. Come back. Clap, everyone.
Oh, I miss Kentober every day.
Well, I think on that, it does kind to draw ourselves to a close. We do have one question real quick, and this can be for you guys just as people who'd be attending the tournament. So Todd wants to know, as players who will be attending the Grand Prix, what would you like to tell the TO ahead of time that you'd like to happen at the event, or suggestions for the event to run smoothly?
Oh, suggestion to the event. If I show up playing a Chamimi deck with 4 Arrowin in it, and then you tell me the day of that it's not legal because it's a buy 2 box promo and people reasonably can't have 4 copies of it, ooh, I'm going ballistic. I'm shutting that shit down. You gotta tell me now if I can't bring that card. You gotta tell me yesterday.
Brandon, if you were to go, was there anything you want them to know?
I'm going to cheat and extrapolate on what Aaron said. I don't actually think that's a terrible idea. That's the first time I've heard it, but banning that card is actually probably net positive for the event. So think about it.
Frank?
I've got nothing.
Sounds good.
Good job, Frank.
So with that, we are going to call it
I
for...
have no experience in the TO aspect of things.
Frank's in the back of his head like
nothing
changing the draft.
either.
It's not too late to make it draft.
I had nothing either, but then when Aaron said that, it like sparked something in my head. I was like, actually, we need to talk about that. So I said it.
So with that, we are going to draw to a close. It has been a wonderful night talking with you all. Thank you guys so much in the chat for being active, asking questions and everything else. And thanks, Aaron, for stepping in. I believe you will be taking over for Ryan for the most part. We'll have to see how that goes.
First time you've mentioned it to me, but sure.
We'll talk about it more. Ryan, because of Ryan's work with Argent Saga, it's very potential that we will be kind of shifting that around. We'll also have Cal Tuma in on occasion. He has volunteered to help out as well. But we're always glad to have the conversation and thankful to you guys, the watchers. If you want to feel like supporting us, you can go ahead and click those buttons down below. Go check out the sponsors, buy some swag, or click that join button. Super easy to do. $5 a month goes to support the channel. It really helps us out. But until next time, this has been myself, DMO73, and I've been joined by Aaron Miles, Brandon Bremont, and Frank Klosser. And we'll see you all next week. Class dismissed.
Bye, Felicia's.